Okay, next we're going to talk about bass lines. So remember what I said in the last one? Sound design is a lot of the scope, so we're not going to talk about constructing like a really sweet sounding bass. Although I am going to talk a little bit about sound design in the third video of this unit, when we talk about just kind of general frequency things to be thinking about. So a couple of short lessons on bass lines, just to some general things to be thinking about. First, in this video, I want to cover finding a good bass line given a chord progression. So we have a chord progression that we like, and we want to find what the best bass line would be for that. So I've created a chord progression here. We're in the key of A minor, and this isn't from a song or anything. This is just something I just kind of spit out. So here I have an A minor 7 chord, A minor 7, and then I go to the 7th scale degree. So this is a major chord. This is a G major with a 7th, and this is the weird one that has the minor or the major chord with a minor 7th. This is the dominant chord. Sounds like that. And then I go to the third chord of the key, which is C, because A, B, C. And I just have a C major, the third chord. And then I go to the 5th scale degree and I have an E minor. Okay, so let's hear it. Okay, so this is root position. And I want you to see it in root position because our notes, the root notes are A, G, C, and E. So let's remember that for a minute, and I'm going to take it out of root position. So I'm going to take this note up an octave, maybe this note down an octave. So now they're nice and tight. And I'm going to take the whole thing up an octave to make it sound a little bit better. Let's hear it again. Okay, and let's set that up to loop. Okay, so now we have a nice simple chord progression. So when it comes to putting a bass line on a chord progression, the easiest and most obvious thing to do is have your bass be the roots of the chords. Easy. It will work 100% of the time. So let's just do that. I'm going to copy this down to another track where I also have a piano set up. And I'm going to get my roots back. So remember the root was A, G, C, E. Right? A, G, C, E. Yeah. So now I'm going to get rid of everything else. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. And get rid of that. Okay, A, G, C, E. Now I have to think, do I want this E to go up or down? So let's have it go up. So same note, I just moved it up an octave. Okay, so now I'm going to take this whole bass line and move it down an octave so that it's bass. And let's hear just the bass line. Okay. So that will always work. All I did was the roots of the chords in my bass line. So let's hear it together. I'm going to turn the bass line up louder than the chord progression. So the bass is just playing the roots of the chords. So when you're working on something, if you want to create a bass line, the roots of the chords always works 100% of the time. Another thing we could do, if we don't want to use the roots of the chords, let's say, okay, that works, but it's a little boring. Let's do something more interesting. So let's get rid of that bass line. And let's go back to my chord progression, and I'm going to copy it down again to my bass. So other things we could do is we could just weave our way through here and pick some notes that work. Any of these notes are fair game. I would stay away from doing the 7th. So these two chords have a 7th. Putting the 7th in the bass is a little dangerous. It's worth trying because sometimes it sounds good, depending on the context. But let's avoid it for now. Let's have our bass line be A. And then let's go up to B, because that'll be a nice step motion, just going A to B. So even though here my root is G, I'm going to do B as my bass line. Here my root is C, and let's leave it as C because that makes a nice motion here. And now I could go down to B, even though E is my root, I could go down to B. Let's do that. So now I have this bass line that makes a little bit more sense. It doesn't jump around as much. It kind of walks up and then down a little bit. So it goes up here and then down a little bit. So that has a nice shape to it. So let's hear how that sounds because it's not using the roots. So it'll be a little less easy, I guess. But let's hear what it sounds like. Oops. Oops, let's move it down an octave so it sounds like a bass line. So you can hear this B here and also here, but especially here. It sounds a little crunchy, but that's okay. It's still a right note. It's still in the chord. But when you put a note in the bass, it has such influence over the chord that it can really change the feeling of the whole chord. So you really kind of want to be careful about what you put there. So any note in the chord will work. Some will work better than others. The root will always work great. Let's do a little experiment. Let's take this one step further and let's start fresh with my chord progression and let's go back to using the root. So I'm going to get rid of the extra notes and just use the root of the chord. And let's see if we can use the roots and just jazz this up a little bit. Let's go down an octave. So one thing I could do is I could just put a rhythm on it. I could just make this quarter notes. So now it's going to doom, 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 doom. Okay. I could spruce up that rhythm by getting rid of some notes. Okay, let's give me that one note back. Let's do that little anticipation trick that we did with the melodies. So I'm gonna have the bass line move to the next chord a beat early. So I'm gonna take this A that I'm on now here and move that down to a G. So this is gonna transfer to the G a note early. This one's gonna transfer to the C a note early. And this one's gonna transfer to the E a note early. And then we'll have it cycle around. So the E goes back up to the A note early. Let's hear how that sounds. Okay, that's cool. What if I could liven this up a little bit more by flipping some of these up an octave. So let's take, when I have 3 notes in a row like this, let's throw one of them up an octave. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, that's cool. What if these were all down an octave? So I put them underneath the melody. Except for this one. Oops. Let's hear that. Okay, that's a little low for my taste, so let's put them back up an octave. I did kind of like it where these were up. Okay, so that's an option that can work. If you do this too much, you turn into disco. So be careful about having, if you have a bass line that just goes between the octaves, like do da do da do da do da do da do da do, that's kind of like disco 101. So if you want a disco sound, that's the way to do it. Okay, let's go back. To having everything in the same octave. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of my anticipation here. I'm going to go back to just playing the roots of the chords, but in this rhythm. Another thing you can do is throw a non-chord tone in there. We saw in the Skrillex tune a passing bass note. So a note that wasn't in the bass line, or that wasn't in the chord, that was just passing. And you can put those in the bass note too. Now remember what I just said though, that the bass has a lot of influence over the chord. So it can change the quality of the chord. So you need to be a little more careful when you do this in bass notes than when you do it in melody. Melody you can get away with a little bit more with dissonance. But here you have to be a little bit more careful. But let's try it. So let's say this A, let's have it go up to a B. It's going to go dun, 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 dun. And it's going to go up to the B and then down to the G. Let's have this G fill in the gap here. So let's go up to an A. Actually, let's go up to a B and then I'll have the note before I go up to an A. So we're going to hear two Gs and then the G will walk up the scale to the next chord. And let's have this one walk down the scale to the next chord. I have too big of a gap here. So let's go A, G. Let's do that. So I'm kind of splitting the difference in this gap here. Let's hear how this sounds. Let's have this E walk back up to the A. F, G, so it lands on the A. Okay, cool. Let's maybe take, this has 3 notes in a row. It's the only spot where you have the 3 of the same note in a row. So let's maybe try moving it down to a non-chord tone to the G. So it goes A, G, A, and back up. Okay, see, that works pretty well. It all depends on what kind of sound you want. This has this very meandering sound where it's moving around a lot. And the other ways we did it, it was staying really steady and then just went to the chord tones. But we can have non-chord tones and bass lines. You just need to be a little careful about it. But even this, where we're going out of the chord a lot, sounds good. So I think that's all I wanted to say about that. The key to this lesson is remember that when you're figuring out a bass line, the roots of the chord, always good. Non-chord tones, also good with danger. And anticipations, usually good too. A couple ideas for you while you're creating bass lines. But just remember, no matter what you do, stay in key. You got to stay in the key. If you go outside of the key, you run into more problems. You can have passing notes that are not in the key, but you're less likely to find something that just works right out of the box. You're going to have to experiment if you do that and find out what works well. Okay? Onward.